Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we have a couple of IRL tournament results to look at, as well as the latest online stuff, and then I'm going to be wrapping it all nicely in a bow with my sort of last-minute meta thoughts going into this weekend's regionals. I'm playing in Malmo myself, still having a headache over the last few cards within my deck and actually what deck I'm going to be playing, which we'll talk about as to why I'm sort of tearing my hair out as of late, as well as, of course, there's the Hartford Regional Championships going on as well, so a lot to be looking forward to in this format. We will start with the Philippines Championships 2023. It was a 133 player event, and it was won by friend of the channel Joshua, who sent me their deck list in person saying thanks, because this is actually an OmniPoke deck list. This is just straight after the EUIC, where we made the slight tweaks to Pablo's list from the EUIC, where we added in the cleansing gloves. I think that's one of the only things I can attribute to this deck list. Otherwise, very, very good list. Well done. We don't actually have all the 60s, so we can't see all of the Lost Box details, unfortunately, but also in top 4 there was another Mew. Mew was actually doing really well in this top 8, where I think there was 3 of them. This Mew is reincorporating the Oricorio. Now, I do think if you're expecting Mirror, Oricorio is pretty good, but also if you're expecting Arctina to be very popular, which I do think is going to happen this weekend, there's definitely a reason to play Oricorio, right? Because now you can sit with Mew V in the active with Oricorio. And of course, you can just say, oh, they can tutor out Choice Belt, but then they're not tutoring out part of their Judge Path combo, or sometimes they have to go DTE plus the belt rather than having to grab Path and stuff like that against you. Yes, you have a ton of answers to Path, but it's never nice just getting Judge Pathed by the Arctina player the whole time. So retreating into a Genesect feels quite bad, because you can sometimes get hand disrupted and then you get trapped there. So leaving a Mew active with an Oricorio sort of safety net, I think is one of the nicest things you can do against Arctinas. So just a small thing to bear in mind there. I feel like Oricorio is kind of reasonable in the deck. I don't think it's busted, but I think there's like potential reason for it to come back into some lists now. So just a small thing to note. There was a Lugia doing pretty well. This is another straightforward list. Looks very similar to Reagan's 60. If it's not the exact same list, it seems pretty similar. Looking very solid as well. I think most people have figured out that Urshi is definitely the right way to go about things. Okay, so this isn't the same as Reagan's list, because it's not playing the penny, right? I think it's playing extra T-Tar over the penny. Correct me if I'm wrong. One of those sort of card changes. But that's really the only sort of 59th, 60th card. I wouldn't go without either Penny or Thornton. It's like take your pick over which one you think is better. There's reasons to like both. There is one Lost Box list that we can take a look at, and it looks to be a Charizard-based build. This looks pretty similar to Pedro's list from the EUIC, where it's still incorporating the Pidgeot. It's got a Choice Belt in there and one Forest Seal Stone. A little bit going on here. Charizard Lost Box is definitely one of the decks high on my radar right now, and this is still a very solid way to play the 60. Pidgeot giving you some help into some Lost Zone matchups if they don't have the pop-off. And then finally in top 8 there was still a Guardy. So Guardy's in this really precarious spot where it was underrated going into the EUIC. Then the next week, because Tord won with Guardy, it was so out of proportion. Like, oh my god, it's insane, Bediff. And it's like obviously not the best deck in the game when Lost Box is like a pretty hard counter to the deck. So I think it's expected going into the next set of tournaments that Guardy's probably going to be around that 10% deck. I don't think it's really going to get towards that sort of 20% day one meta share that we saw last weekend or a couple weekends ago at the regionals. I just don't think that's humanly possible, because Lost Box is expected to be still the most popular deck going into the tournament, and they basically feast on Guardies. There's so many ways that they can punish you, and I think that's not really changed. As we're looking at it, this list looks very similar to Tord's. It's not playing the Penny either. It's just playing double collapsed in here to try and get rid of your 2 prizey guys. I think that's a reasonable choice, to be honest. Try and gain that space for an additional card. I don't know what that additional card is. Okay, it's also playing Forest Seal Stone over Sky. I really don't like this too much, especially because there's actually more V-Stars coming back into the mix now with Arctina, and it makes your prize map into Arctina much nicer, actually, to have the Sky Seal Stone. Now you can get an easy like EX Gust prize on like a Bibarrel or something, and it be relevant to your prize map. So I really like still having the Skyseal Stone in here. It gives you much more coverage against Mew as well, of course. So you can play around Roxanne path. You at least force a Judge path, which is a bit, nicer for you to hit your outs. There's a few other things going on here. It's playing the double Shining Arcana. One thing that I am interested in this weekend is Guardy with double Arcana and actually Champions Festival. I think if you want to flex, I think it's a good weekend to play Guardy Festivals because I'm expecting there to be more Arc as well as Lugia. So hitting 280 with Brainwave is actually super relevant right now. I didn't think it was necessarily that important going into EUIC, but I think now we're at that point where Arc has really made itself probably a top 5 in terms of popularity style deck, where I think it could almost reach 10% on its own. That's actually having a Guardian that can swing for 300 as a single prizer is very, very threatening and dangerous. So I'm kind of interested in anyone brave enough to play Guardi could play Champs Festivals and have a good time into the V-Star heavy format that I'm expecting over the next couple of days. So I'm already littering in my thoughts as we get to the metagame, but that's the Philippines top 8. Let's also have a look at the Bogotá special event. 76 players, so not a huge amount going on here, but you can see the US contingent that travelled over, obviously strong players in their own rights, profited quite nicely from this special event in terms of claiming a bunch of points. Andrew doing very well with a Turbo Lost Box. This is the multi-stone thing. This has mostly been performing well online, but it's cool to see it do well in person as well, where you have kind of the option for both based on what matchup you're in. Definitely secures that Mew a lot more. Definitely helpful into Lugia at times as well, where you can get that Skyseal Zone sort of comeback. It feels like you can be behind against Lugia quite a lot if you don't get your Dragonite pop-off. But looking like a pretty solid base to take from. We've also got Giratina Lost Box in second place, so a pretty good result for Tina, and that's not the first time I'm going to say that today, actually. I am a big fan of the double temple. It's also playing choice bat as well, so it has a lot of ways to get around V-Guard 280 hit pointers, which I think is actually quite important. Again, like I was just saying with the Arcana Guardi Champs Festival thing, double Sinnoh is your best defense against Lugia, but also your best sort of proactive means of dealing with them and proactively dealing with Arceus Tina. So I think Sinnohs are kind of staples in Tina. So that's nice to see. If you want to just play one temple, one belt, and then gain the space of becoming like a beach court or something, that's also viable. Outside of that, looks like a pretty good 60, to be honest with you. Not too much I can disagree with. The choice, the Ultra Ball is kind of a weird one when you're already playing a thick 3-3. Just a minor debate there versus just having like the Nest Ball or having the additional rope or switch cart or something in the list. Those are all kind of minor debates, but otherwise looking like a pretty solid 60 there. We have Lugia in top 4, doing pretty well. And again, it looks like people are dropping the Penny / Thornton. I don't know, I always felt like the Thornton Penny thing seems really good. I know it's one of these cards that you kind of have to time properly to be good, and it's not just like a consistent simple shell. Like this is playing double collapse to try and do a similar thing, I suppose, and gain that space where you just take it from Mezagoza and then you gain an extra like ball space or whatever, or supporter space. Still seems kind of weird to me though. I think the Penny's still really good. I know we're seeing less Morwhile now, but there's always that tipping point. If people get too tempted, maybe people are going to start going back to these weird trapping strats. We have another DTE doing pretty well with an Arven snuck in as an extra supporter card. Not too much else spicy from that stage. More Lugias, Connor as well. Pretty adept at playing Lugia. Is still playing the Thornton, is playing Impact Energy, and is trying the one T-Tar, one Stonjourner, and one Yveltal, so has that sort of flexibility with the Thornton to sort of double dip on some of these when you think it's relevant, which is kind of strong. I still really like the Impact Energy. It makes the Yveltal a much stronger card, I think. So it just supports it so much nicer with like awkward prizing and makes you less reliant on those urns throughout the game, because Urshi's going to come into play in some matchups, but sometimes you just don't need the VMAX at all. And when it comes into play, you need these urns, but otherwise you're just going to be spending them on these guys, right? Looks pretty good. Then we have an Arc Goo doing well. This was something I was testing very early on in the format, but pretty much dropped it after a little while. But this one's pretty spicy. It's playing Dragonite in here as well. That Dragon Gale doing a decent chunk. Has the double belt, so you can 280 things, which is kind of cool for that higher damage output threshold. Has a Radiant Serena to undo the spread of your own Dragon Gale, I believe is probably the concept here. Also somewhat frustrating for Lost Box players. Some people go cram into Snorlax, and you can do the similar thing that Lugia does, where you drop the Serena on them and make it more difficult for them. This has double cave as well, so a very heal-focused goo. I'm quite surprised there's just one path in here, because I do still think that's probably one of your better defenses against Lugia. So I'm surprised to see that adaptation. It's also playing the Adventurous Discovery. There's a bit going on here for sure. Just the 1-1 bit barrel. Definitely some cheeky stuff going on in the list in terms of a consistency sense. Look at this. It's cutting into Ultra Ball and Nest Ball, the guaranteed good cards for coin flips. That stresses me right out. These are the first cards on the bloody list at 4 copies, please. Please. I am kind of interested in the higher chorus versus research, because it's definitely something that I've debated in just Arctinas, honestly, which is better. Obviously, you have a deeper dig with research, but you have painful discards, especially with the energy I found pretty painful. This was playing Recycler and leaning into chorus. I feel like you don't need both of those things. You're already choosing to discard less things, and you have Clara. There's so much wacky stuff going on in this list. Oh my god, I need to lie down. Right. You have another Lost Box. This looks very similar to Grant's successful list from last week. Looking pretty good there. Yeah, it is the same list. And then we have Guardy. Seems like a lot of people are doing this double Arcana thing. I think it makes sense. Oh, that's playing double Cress as well. That's super interesting. Haven't seen double Cress much. It's playing double Sinnoh and 1 Collapse as well. I do like the extra stadium coming into the list. But honestly, I think it's time for Champs Fest. I've been saying it since release. I've been saying it actually pre the release of Guardian for Champs Fest. But now it's actually time. I promise you it's time. What else we got? Just the 1 research in here, so really trimming away from the Tord approach. Going to double Judge. Oh, just 1 research. Research is so busted. It draws 7. It's also light on the ball search. Man, that's really weird. I guess you got to have space for this 2 count and 2 count here. Huh, that's super weird though. I was playing the Forest Hill Stone thing as well. Wacky. I don't know, I'm still not a big fan of that combo, to be honest. Sky just seems so good still. Right, we move on to the late night tournaments, and we'll start with the metagame for both of these, because these are multiple 100-player tournaments. How many was in this one? I've not clicked the right button to see how many, but yeah, a few hundred in both of these. So we'll start with the metagame, because I do think it's somewhat of a fair reflection as going into the next set of tournaments. Lost Box being most popular, followed by Mew, then Arctina and Lugia, with the Lost Box, Zard, Guardy, and some other stuff dropping off. I think it's kind of right that Gudra's down here. It definitely suffers into Lugia. I'm still surprised at how low Lugia is percentage-wise. Still at sub 10%, when I feel like it could be like the safe play this weekend, because it plays well into most Lost Boxes, I feel. Definitely forces a lot out of opponents. And it just keeps things honest, you know? It can battering ram its way through the other multi-prize decks if you just get out of Judge Path. And it still keeps, like, even Gardevoir, it keeps that deck honest. So I feel like Lugia's just seems to be, to me, definitely the second best deck in the game, if not the best. So I'm surprised that it's not seeing that same amount of popularity. Mew being very popular as well as Arctina, there's a lot of path around. So maybe this combined total is what's pushing Lugia's sort of play rate down. It's just there's so much expected path in the room, and that's one of the only things that Lugia kind of struggles with, right? Doesn't surprise me that Gardevoir is really dipping in popularity. Still popular enough, but it's not like it's worth... Like, Lost Box has become what everyone expected, right? Where it's almost that, like... It's definitely the most popular deck, and people are sort of teetering towards the S tier. I know when tier lists were initially made, pre-EUIC, everyone was saying Lost Box is the best deck, and I feel like everyone's back in that mental headspace. So it almost feels like going back into the EUIC is how we have to interpret this next set of regionals, where Lugia is a bit more refined, so I think that's probably safely the second best deck, and Lost Box is like the target, I think, of the format. And the difference is people are bringing Arctina now in droves that are just going to be like, hey, I can play the game, I can judge path you out of the game, good luck, kind of thing. So, yeah, that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. Anyway, let's have a look at the top 8. It was actually won by a Lost Box. I've copied the list for some reason instead of showing you off. But this is another Kyogre gate build where it has the aggressive try and get to 7 option for the high roll players, but also has the Kyogre late game package. Seems to be pretty well established as one of the best ways to play Lost Box right now. We have a Mew getting second, playing a Manaphy. Hello! We haven't seen this for a while, where you can try and shut down a Kyogre's win condition, which is kind of cool. Is Kyogre popular? Has it pushed over the line of popularity enough in Lost Box to be the right choice? I don't know, you know. Plus, it lost in finals to a Kyogre anyway. You have to remember that. That's a cool idea. That's a cool idea. I definitely think it's worth Mew trying to tech for Lost Box. I just don't know if Manaphy is the right one. We then have a multi-stone build again with Zapdos fighting coming back in. I do think there's some people who will be targeting Arceus as well, and Zapdos is a good way to try and do that with the Zapdos Sky Seal package. I don't really like it. Oh, I guess it does have 4 stadium bounces. I was like, this isn't enough bounce to stadium, but it has the vacuums as well. So, yeah, pretty well supported Zapdos there. With 1 copy of Raihan as well. Yeah, this looks like a pretty well constructed multi-stone build. Yeah, I'm a fan of that. It seems pretty good. I don't know how good you are in Mirror, but I guess you don't care too much about the Sky Seal stuff. If you still have the turbo part of the list, you're still doing your thing and racing to 10, right? We have a Lugia in top 4. This one is incorporating the Penny. So still doing pretty well on that front. Just the 1 counts of all your Mons seems pretty reasonable to me. We have a Miraidon Flaffy, which is, I don't know what this card is. Ampharos EX? Okay, it's an Ampharos EX, everyone. Which is kind of a tanky 2-pricey boy that can evolve out of Flaffy into... what matchups do you really want to make the Ampharos in? I'm not too sure, to be honest with you. It has the Zapdos, so you can hit 230, which I think is important into T-Tar, which I think is a pretty good idea. When you're not playing the Miraidon, no, the Reggie package. It has the Magnezone in here to help out against the Lost Box decks, and to some extent you can pressurize Guardy decks as well with this. An early knockout on their Manaphy and then threaten the snipes seems pretty cool. It is playing the mixture of stones, is playing just the 1 Arven, 1 Judge as well. I feel like you want the double Judge in the deck to stabilize your Lost Box even more. Some cool ideas though. I'm a fan of the Zapdos. I think that's a cool inclusion. Does it change Raichu math? Yeah, it lets you hit 310 easier, right? As well. Yeah, it means you need 1 less energy for Raichu. So that's actually a really important one-off. I think that's a very good idea. We have Arctina, the sort of standard list that we've come to know, do quite well. I'm kind of thinking that second belt might be slightly outweighing cleansing gloves going into the next tournament, because I am thinking that Guardi's going to be on the down low, so I think second choice belt could just be the stronger choice, because I'm expecting Mirror, and you have to get through V-Guard sometimes, so I'm low-key thinking that double belt might be better than the cleansing gloves. It's that adaptation that made sense when we expected a ton of Guardi, and maybe I'm thinking that Guardi's falling off a cliff when there's still a contingent of players willing to play it, but I kind of feel like the second belt might be slightly better again. Seeing as though Guardi oftentimes damages itself a little bit anyway, I feel like you could maybe make that transition back, sort of revert back to double belts. I think that makes sense with Mirror being popular now. We have another DTE-based build of Mew doing the stuff. I think we've seen a ton of these now, but Mew's still really good. I think there's a lot of hype about Arctina doing well, and I don't think that's necessarily bad for Mew. I think you're still fine into that matchup. We have a Guardi making top 8. This looks very Tord-like. It's playing triple Candy, though, eating into the Fog count and the Ultra Ball count a little bit to play a Heavy Ball. And it's playing just the 11... Sorry, just the 12 rather than the 1-1 split there. Oh, it's playing no rocks either. It's just playing double judge for proactive hand disruption. Kind of interesting. I actually think, yeah, that's not a bad shout. Yeah, proactive disruption is probably better against most lost boxes. So yeah, that is our first late night. Then we have the second late night. The metagame was actually slightly different for this one, where Arctina was the second most popular deck, then Lugia back up in that sort of bolstering range of 10%. Guardy's still hanging on in there in terms of popularity. Then we have Mew, and then the Dragon lost boxes kind of down a little bit. So this is, I kind of expect it to be similar to this, where I think it's going to be Lost Zone, then Lugia, then Arctina, Guardian, Mew, probably all around that 10% range. And then other decks. I feel like Lugia's probably going to be more than 10%. It's such a good deck right now. I don't see a reason to not play Lugia outside of like, I don't like coin flips. But you can navigate the flips to still work in your favor, whether it's heads or tails a lot of the time, unless it's exactly turn 1 and you need a basic Lugia. So, I don't know. Lugia just seems underplayed for how good it is right now in online tournaments. Regardless, we have a Tina doing pretty well. This has the triple threat of stadiums. I said how I liked Temple, but I can't really judge courts coming into the list as well. This one is incorporating the carts as well as the regular switch. Quite low on switch count overall, actually. Very low on switch count. Is incorporating some gears instead, just to chorus more, I suppose. But yeah, really low on those switch outs. We have a Mew in second. It's more of the same. This one's actually added in cross switches, which we haven't seen for a while. And Sinnoh! What the? Imagine double turboing. Does this count as a damage mod? That's insane. That must be such a difficult card to play properly, right? Because you have to quad energy your Mew to attack. Then we have a pretty straightforward streamlined build that has some trekking shoes in here to try and speed things up a little bit. We have an Arcdura actually still making it through. This is actually a pure Arcdura, no like third man. It is playing the water energy for the fish though. That's kind of spicy. It's playing a mixture of path and city. Typically you just see city in these sorts of builds, but also incorporating some paths. Has the Volo for a big discard of a chunky boy that's tanked some hits. I don't know. I'm sus of Arcdura. It seems quite bad into new age Lugias now. It was kind of punishing Lugia at EUIC, but now it doesn't really punish it so well, I don't think. We have an Arctina continue to do well. This one's incorporating Dunsparce, so they're one step ahead of the Urshifu VMAX, I suppose. They can still, of course, one-shot you, but you make it more difficult for them. It's also helpful against like Stonjourner Tech and I guess Zapdos to an extent as well. I don't know how much I like the Dunce, honestly. I also think if you're playing Lugia, Stonjourner is actually not the right tech card to go for against this matchup. It should just be like an extra stadium or guarantee you play Pumpkaboo or like an extra ball search card in general. Because Stonjourner doesn't really matter too much. You win a prize race if you set up as Lugia in the matchup, I think. We have an Arc Pika Coco. I think Pika's pretty copium when the Lugia matchup is now playing Urshifu as well. I tried this 1-1 line in Arctina this week and it just wasn't good. So I wouldn't really go for that. Yeah, you actually need to have a V-Guard on your Pikachu, right? Oh no, because one blow gets through every effect anyway. Yeah, it doesn't even matter. It's getting blown up regardless. So there you go. We then have another Arctina. All looking pretty standardized. This one was playing the double belt. And then we have a Guardy. Some of these Guardies are still sneaking in and around. And this is another Tord list. Seems to still be good pedigree. Everyone's adding in the extra Guardy, basically. That's always the change I'm seeing. This one's just cut a research for a Guardian, isn't playing the Serena. It's just at 1 gust still. A little bit cheeky. Alright, and then we just have one more tournament where we have Lost Box doing pretty well. This is... Okay, so this is a turbo build that's incorporating the Grass Energy Tropius, the rally back to try and help out against the Lugia matchup for a knockout on T-Tars. So that's pretty sneaky. I've thought about this card this week a little bit, not gonna lie. Has synergy with Mirage Gate, obviously. to try and give you a single prize attacker in the matchup, because typically you're relying on Raikou and Dragonite in that matchup quite a lot. Your Cram and Sableye get kind of nullified in that matchup, so having a single prize Mon is kind of cool, kind of a good idea. We have a Guardian second place. This one's added an Arven and a Forest Seal Stone package. Everyone's going for the Forest. Sky is still so good. It's so good right now. There's so much Arc. It's so good against it. Insane. Okay. We have an Arc Umbreon Dura, and it's added in Towers. That's a cool idea, just to draw more in the opening stages. Yeah, I like that. That's a kind of cool adaptation from what we saw previously. I don't think it played Towers before, right? It just played Little Cities. Yeah, you have the Karen, you have the singles themselves as well. Yeah, a decent few outs there, just to give yourself some push in the opening stages. That's one of the issues of this deck in general, so give yourself some outs to draw is kind of cool. Like the idea there. We have a Mew. This one's also adding in the Arvid. I know this will trigger some people. And also Oricorio. Have more Tina. Tina's actually doing low-key pretty well. I think it's happy to see Arc coming back into the format, right? This is playing the Paths. There's a very thick Tina line. Double Rocks as well. Some pretty cheeky stuff going on in this list. Have more Mew. These are all like 59 cards at this point. I lie. What is this? What is this doing here? You're trying to brick people. Don't play Copycat in a deck that you're trying to brick people. There's no way. There's no way that gets anywhere near a deck list in 2023. You're actively a grief, let me brick my opponent deck. What on earth are you doing with a Copycat in your list? What? That's disgusting. Okay, wow. We have another Block Lax control deck with the Manaphy bringing things into play for trap plays that we've seen a couple times before. Hold on. It's playing a card I need to read aloud. It's just forcing... Oh, interesting. Okay. So you force a Pokemon into their hand, so then you can Manaphy. That's... I mean, it's bad, but it's funny. That's really funny. Gives you some card information as well. It's like imperfect information. Man, if you hit off Lure Module, just... you'd be so tilted. You can make your odds good though, right? You can Misfortune a couple times throughout the game, get rid of a ton of item cards, then hit him with the mod. Oh my word, it's genius. That's insane. Surely, I mean, lucky diffing with the Manaphy does feel bad if you whiff, right? I guess it's correct. That's also kind of why the Sydney's in the deck, though, right? So you get hand knowledge. We have a Guardy Mewtwo doing pretty well as well, with the double Sinnoh in here. Yeah, I'm still not much of a believer, to be honest, in the Mewtwo, compared to all the other results we've seen. But there you go, those are our online results. Now, I've basically talked around it a little bit throughout the video, but I'm just going to try and summarize my main thoughts. Let's start with Lost Zone Box, which is here and has kind of a deceptively weak matchup spread in general. I think it's likely that we're going to see copycats of the Kyogre build that we saw from Grant, and probably some Skyseal combo-y builds as well. Maybe Forest and Sky combined, because I do think that adding in Zapdos makes sense right now. I do think the Skyseal Stone gives you more coverage into the Lugia matchup, gives you some more catch-up plays that you can make. And I do think this is probably going to be the most popular deck going forward into the format, so definitely bear that in mind. Lugia is an interesting one. Its Dura matchup is getting better. Still definitely a little bit shaky. Its Gudra matchup is getting better as well, because you also have the Urshi plays, so in theory, everything looks like a good matchup for this deck. Like, at that point, you're only really that negative into, like, Mew and Arctina, which are quad path decks, which you play the outs for and just hope that in a best of 3 situation, you find your outs enough times to win the game. So Lugia, to me, feels like the most powerful deck in format, and for some reason, people aren't playing it right now. I don't get it. It just seems like a very well-placed, very powerful deck in the format that has answers to most things without needing to add in any more text than we already have. So you can just take Reagan's list or a like 2 or 3 card different list from that and just do very well this weekend. I think there'll be a decent number of people doing that. And I think if you just don't know what to play, I think Lugia or Arctina are those decks, right? Where they kind of just do the same thing in the opening turns. You have a very simple goal of turns 1 and 2, and then your decision making, comes into fruition from that point on, where it's like, what am I trying to power up? What attacks are most efficient for each matchup, etc. So I think that's going to be a pretty good play for people this weekend. I think Arctina's like overperforming in terms of it's won a few tournaments now, and Arc in general is doing very well. And I do think you get a little bit punished by the uptick in Lugia, but I think it's just still a fine deck. You are still kind of hanging on in the opening stages. You can crumble to early pressure if you go second especially. But the deck just seems fine, and it has frustrations for most things in format. So I think those would be my top 3 decks going into this weekend. I'm low-key interested in Guardi, and Guardi's so weird. I don't know why I'm thinking about Guardi so much, because it's obviously so bad into Lost Box, and you basically are tanking a matchup. Which is obviously like just terrible, and you really shouldn't do that. And also, you don't like seeing an uptick in Arctina apparently, because it's just another path-heavy deck. But I'm thinking that a Guardi that plays double Champs Festival as well as a Collapse, so an extra Stadium bounce to path, at least 1 extra Stadium bounce, maybe even add in that second copy of Worker as well, who knows, and lean more towards Shiny Arcana Guardi. I think it's really good at feasting on Lugia and Arc, actually. But you are sacking Lost Box, so you're still dodge and weaving, which really makes me terrified. And there's probably people who don't believe in Champs Festival or can't be bothered to put them in sleeves, So I don't know why, I just have it in the back of my head that I want to play Guardi this weekend and just draw cards and have fun and just feel like I have lunch breaks if I hit too many Lost Boxes, which is such a bad mentality to have. But I don't know why. The matchup spread looks so bad for Guardi right now, but I really think it's a better deck than this. But I think it's going to drastically drop in popularity for good reason as well. Mew's still fine as well. Nothing wrong with Mew. It's quite bad into Arctina, which is interesting. So definitely double belting is good in this matchup. Also, the possibility of Silene coming back into the deck makes sense. So you just have more fuel in the matchup to get through their chunky stuff. They play V-Guards as well, right? So they force a lot of tablets out of you. So that could be pretty interesting. Outside of that, you know that your Lost Box is kind of ugly as well. But you do what you can, really. What else? Those are really the top contenders. I wanted to just quickly touch on Miraidon, because I had a copium few moments earlier today where I was like, well, at least Miraidon can attack turn 1, and sometimes that's enough to beat Lugias and Arcs. It's not. Your win rate is pretty bad as Miraidon, Regieleki, and the Flaffy build, interestingly enough, I just wanted to have a quick comparison over these 2 matchup spreads. And I think this extra 10% buff that you get into Lost Box is probably just because you play Magnezone, right? I think it's pretty much exclusively because this list plays Magnezone and Aleki doesn't, that you have a better time into Lost Zone Box. So I do think that's pretty important to your ratios. And I also thought it was interesting that you're better into Arctina with the Flaffy build, and I think that comes down to the Raichu just being more effective when you don't need a Stadium bounce, and Arc is going to continually path and judge the Aleki build, so sometimes the Aleki is just turned off. But yeah, just interesting to see that the Flaffy build is coming out on top over what most people expected was the Aleki build to do the best. But yeah, its matchup spread is pretty poor overall. When you're wanting to hit Goodrotina and Arcdura, that's the low percentages of the format and not the most important tier 1 stuff. So yeah, that's my sort of stream of consciousness this weekend. I've been playing Lost Box Charizard for a long time. I'm probably just going to default back to it. I have something in the back of my head telling me to play Guardi just for a bit of fun. And if I'm really panicking, I'll just play Arctina and just say, I hope you brick. Let me know your thoughts down below. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow for another one. Cheers.